This is Jewish Spotlight, a weekly television program presented by Chabad Lubavitch of Long Island, featuring various aspects of modern Jewish life and Jewish culture. Now, here is your host, Rabbi Tuvia Teldin.
Shalom. Rabbi Schneerson, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, had a strong position about the situation in Israel and about the security of Israel. And his voice was heard throughout the world, and it was very important also to Israel and its government. It's important that you should know also what was and is his position about the situation in Israel, its security, and its future. Let's take a look at a film produced by Jewish Educational Media called Peace on the Land. It will help you see something very important, which is important to understand the situation we face now in Israel. Sit back and enjoy.
I was 12 in the spring of 1967. I remember a sense of fear that led to a bonding of all the Jews in Israel. For 3 weeks, we were all kind and loving to one another. My father was a Holocaust survivor who had seen whole Jewish communities decimated by an invading aggressor. I was joyously participating in civil defense chores, digging bomb shelters, taping windows, painting over car headlights. He was preparing himself for the decimation of his people.
Egypt moves 100,000 troops, 1,000 tanks, and 900 heavy guns into the Sinai Desert. The Egyptian military signs a pact with Syria to the north and Jordan to the east, tightening a noose around Israel's neck. Holocaust scenarios are being discussed openly in the media. After 19 years of an uneasy ceasefire, Israel's enemies are finally going to take up where they left off in 1949. Headlines predict a bloody end. Israeli Defense Department estimates expect at least 10,000 dead in the impending war. Chief Rabbi Gorn sent men to inspect public parks to decide which would be converted to cemeteries after the war. May 23rd. Egypt closed the Straits of Tiran to Israeli shipping, cutting off Israeli ports in Eilat from the rest of the world. The move is officially an act of war. Finally, on May 28th, Prime Minister Eshkol addresses the nation, attempting to calm the raw nerves. He stumbles, obviously not believing his own words. The address only increases the panic. On that same day, in Brooklyn, New York, 20,000 school children gathered at a parade for the Lag BaOmer holiday.
Alle Brüder und Schwestern, was gefühlen sich in Eretz HaKodesh in Eretz Israel, stehen nicht in einem Lager, wo der Rebbe steht bei Schiffse und Schiffse seine Brüche und Atzloche und Yeshua in a vergrößerten Los. Gedei sie sollen mal rauskommen und sie wollen mal rauskommen. Von dem übstigen Masse mit Hatzloche liegt das Zeich, als spezielles Fuß heraushelfen sie. A durch dem, was sie nicht lernen mit Apostel mehr Teile. Und durch dem, was sie nicht mit keinem sein, noch am Mitzwe und noch am Mitzwe. Und wird mit durchlassen keine Gelegenheit in der. Und der Teiche tun in die Hafte und Lache Konecho. In das Massel, der Jeden, wo soll sich noch nicht gefühlen, von die Schwierigkeiten, mit welcher trifft sich, und damit wird mich kuhen, wie ich auf dem Wetter beachtet. Als ich in Eretz Israel, wenn sitzen dort nicht sicher, wenn man sagt, ich schaue in der Eretz, Adoi bestellt Mamschir sein, also sei Scholem in Eretz HaKdesha. V'halisu lachem lomikim. Adoi bestellt sein unser Gott und der Gott von allen Juden, wo sie gefühlt sind. V'yatem tiyom liyom. Und jeder von euch und mir alle zusammen. Und bin Jucha die Juden in Eretz HaKdesha. Wollen sein der lebensten Volk, wovor die zwei Aristiden, die Jode am Reue, Absuche, Agdesha und Archova, von allen Schwierigkeiten.
Foreign embassies ordered their citizens out of Israel. Many people turned to the Rebbe, inquiring whether they should leave. The Rebbe responded.
To the students of Yeshivas Torah's Emes, Jerusalem, greetings and blessings. In response to your telegram, you should continue to study Torah diligently, together with all the students. Certainly the guardian of Israel shall not slumber nor sleep. May we hear good tidings. Menachem Schneerson.
The Rebbe's responses were published widely in the Israeli press. In influencing these people to remain, the Rebbe took personal responsibility for their safety. He also, in effect, guaranteed to parents that their children would return home safely. On June 3rd, the Rebbe called on Jewish men everywhere, particularly soldiers of the IDF, to put on tefillin, if only once, to fulfill the Torah commandment for Jewish males to don phylacteries. He quoted the words of the Midrash.
V'ro kolam v'or kishem Hashem nikro lecha, amizeta das geht idische Zova, wo sehr Aufführer ist ad Hashem Elekei Atzvois, is ot demot vi yoru mi meko da schreckt me sich per se. Wenn nosu mi panecha bescheva drochen man bleibt per se.
In a special telegram to the Israeli Defense Forces, the Rebbe added,
Soldiers who cannot don tefillin in the morning should do so later in the day. Surely the guardian of Israel shall not slumber nor sleep. The Lord is at your right hand. God will strengthen you, and you will return home safely.
Israeli newspapers were soon running stories of the Rebbe's promise that the enemies of Israel will fear and abandon their schemes against her in merit of Jews putting on tefillin. Jewish men in Israel and around the world began to line up to support their brethren in Israel through the Rebbe's new tefillin campaign. At 7:45 a.m. on June 5, 1967, 183 planes took off from Israeli airfields to attack air bases across Egypt. Within 8 hours, almost the entire Egyptian Air Force would be destroyed. In the battle on the ground, the IDF destroyed more than 800 Egyptian tanks, and thousands of soldiers were taken prisoner. 80% of Egypt's military equipment was lost in the Sinai Desert in under 48 hours. At 9:45 a.m., Jordanian forces in southeast Jerusalem opened artillery fire along the border, and Jordanian troops entered the UN's Jerusalem complex. Israel mounted a strong response. By the morning of June 6th, the IDF Central Command occupied areas around Jenin, the Dotan Valley, and the eastern slopes of Mount Gilboa. In 25 hours of bloody battle, East Jerusalem and Shechem were taken. The site of the Holy Temple, including its western wall, was liberated. On the afternoon of June 7th, Israeli forces began to descend into the Jordan Valley. 24 hours later, the battle ended with the conquest of the Hebron Hills. The strategic Golan Heights. from where Syria had been shelling directly down onto Israeli farms and towns. For years, Syria had shelled farmers, kindergartens, and shops at random. On the morning of June 9th, in a literal uphill battle, 2 brigades of the IDF Northern Command managed to break through Syrian defenses on the heights. After 7 hours of heavy fighting, they established strongholds in the northern and central sectors. On the morning of June 10th, Syrian defenses collapsed and most of the Syrian forces withdrew eastward.
On this morning, the Israelis were moving ahead. There was a sudden panic among our soldiers. Their pullout was done in total chaos. The retreating soldiers had left their weapons behind them and were running home. Some were running even before the Israelis had come anywhere near their positions.
At 6 p.m. on June 10th, 6 days after the fighting began, a ceasefire came into effect. Israel experienced a victory unmatched in its history. It conquered an area 3 times its previous size. The world stood in awe. The entire world recognized that a miracle had taken place.
Across the deserts of Sinai, a biblical prophecy comes to pass as the forces of Israel sweep on in an astonishing triumph of strategy.
And that victory is a swift, smashing, and total one, as crack Air Force, infantry, artillery, and tank corps combine to sweep across the Sinai Peninsula to the Suez Canal, east into Jordan.
In 6 days, the war was over. How did Israel do it?
It's the first time in 19 years that Jews have been allowed to visit and pray at the site of the ancient Temple of Solomon.
And Israel shall be a proverb among all people.
The Rebbe expressed profound gratitude to the soldiers who had risked their lives in the war. He also termed the war, which was fought in order to save Jewish lives, a war mandated by Jewish law. Immediately following the war, and many times in the years that followed, the Rebbe warned against the inclination among Israeli leaders to return the territories.
Soviet demand that Israeli troops withdraw from all occupied Arab areas.
Sure enough, the moment the war ended, some Israeli politicians began to assure the world that Israel's hold on the territories was only temporary. The Rebbe held that this posture was not only wrong, but downright dangerous.
Wird sitzen ruhig. Und Tome wird man nicht geben weiter, wird sich miyachiv sein, was zu tun. Wird man umkehren die Stochen, wird nicht sein Milchome, wird man umkehren Jerusalem, Attika, wird nicht sein die Milchome, wird man machen am Luche von Pierlo, wird nicht sein die Milchome, wird man geben Schivien, Rishut, Schivien, Sochis. Für alle, was gefunden sich in Jerusalem, Achadoshe der Araber. Wie sie willen, wird nicht sein, die Milchome, und an nie sollen wir wissen sein, dass sie sein, Rachman und Islam, wo ich sehe, an Milchome als ein Israel. Wir sagen das befehlig. Was in der Gegend Pikuach Nefesh und in Bitochen von 3 Millionen Nieden kein Jirbu, was gefunden sich in Eretz HaKodesh, was ein Hashem lekecha bo, reishis hashono, vadachri shono.
Well, now you know a little bit more about the Rebbe's position about this important issue of Israeli security. But how do we translate that into modern times? Here we face a situation that Israel is surrounded by countries that want to push it into the sea. Well, for that, recently we had a solidarity gathering for our brethren in Israel. And Rabbi Solomon Moshe Paltiel, our rabbi in Port Washington, spoke about what would the Rebbe say now. It's an important message which I also want you to hear. Please sit back, and I think you'll be quite fascinated by what he has to say. Enjoy.
What would the Rebbe say now? It's a question I might be asked by colleagues in discussing the situation. It's a question I might be asked by a politician or a journalist, or by so many who knew of the Rebbe's hard line on terrorism and the Middle East way before it became fashionable. I remember years back when the talks in Madrid were first being contemplated. The Rebbe was visited by a high-level diplomat from Israel. And the Rebbe urged him to caution the government that the talks do not include talks of concession. The Rebbe said talks of concession there can, God forbid, cost the life of a young Jew in South America. 2 weeks didn't pass by before the world witnessed the bombing of the Jewish Community Center in Argentina. The Rebbe maintained throughout, as mentioned so eloquently earlier, that any talk of concession with the enemy needs to be looked at not from how it's viewed in Jerusalem or Washington, but how it's viewed in the Arab street. The Rebbe maintained the talk of concession is viewed on the Arab street as a sign of weakness, as a sign that we don't believe that we have the right to the land given to us miraculously by God through wars of defense. The Rebbe believed that the Arab street looks at talks of concession as an indication that we don't believe that we have the wherewithal to be victorious on the world arena. The Rebbe looked at concession as something viewed in the Arab world as an indication that terrorism pays. Friends, at that time, the Rebbe was a lone voice in the wilderness. But as a strong Jewish leader, he stood upright against what was popular and said the truth that he knew to be right. Today, unfortunately, leaders of Jewry worldwide, leaders of the free world, and decent people of goodwill everywhere recognize this truism, that evil is evil is evil. There are no two types of terrorism. There's no room for concession with the enemy, and there's no place for negotiation with hate. Hate is an equal opportunity offender. And today, as we walk away from this event, we walk away not only with unity, not only with resolve to be proud and strong, but to recognize that we are in the right, and to send the message to our government here, and to send encouragement to the government in Israel, that any further talk of concession will affect not only the Jews in Israel, but a Jew in Lyon and in Tunisia and in Brussels and in Germany. Indeed, decent people everywhere. For the first time last week, news media spoke of the possibility, God forbid, of suicide bombers on these shores. The world is realizing we are a global village, and it's time to eradicate evil everywhere in any form and shape that it might take. And our reaction? And our reaction, friends, to 18 months of pain and suffering? Should we despair? God forbid. The Jewish way is to stand up strong in the face of adversity, in the face of difficulty. Only weeks ago, every one of us said at our Seder tables the beautiful words from the Haggadah. V'hi she'amda la'avotenu v'lanu. It was God's promise that stands by us and our ancestors. In every generation, there might be a tyrant who attempts to annihilate us. V'hakadosh baruch hu matzilenu biyadam. Almighty God will protect us from their hands, now and forever. Friends, we say these words on Passover night not in a monotone or undertone. We say it in a song, each in our own melody in accordance to our family tradition. Why are we so proud of this history of victimization? Why do we so proudly tell our story of pain and survival? A friend in my community in Port Washington recently asked me that question. Rabbi, is that our legacy? Is that who we are, a people who are victims? And I said, no. We're not victims. We are leaders. Every one of us, when we open the news and we hear of anti-Semitism around the world, in countries that we considered beautiful, friendly, civilized countries, and we might despair, we might feel small, we might feel afraid and alone. We need to recognize the anti-Semitism is not because we're victims and downtrodden. The anti-Semitism against the Jew is because the world recognizes the Jew as the historic leader of civilization. In disproportionate numbers, we taught the world so much of what it knows today about being good and kind and fair and equal. Our Bible, the Torah, the bestseller of history, the starting point for the major religions of the world, clearly proclaims us as Am HaNivchar, God's chosen people, chosen for the purpose of teaching the world democracy, equality, freedom, under the banner of one great Creator. Friends, in great measure, we have succeeded in teaching that message. Today, the vast majority of the free world recognizes democracy, recognizes the right of every individual created in the image of God, endowed by their Creator with unalienable rights, freedom, and pursuit of happiness. Today, the only superpower of the world is one of democracy based on Judeo-Christian values. That democracy founded this blessed republic The founding fathers established this blessed republic in no small measure on the teachings of our Torah. So friends, we've been good teachers, and the lesson is about to come to an end. The world is uniting. Good people around the world are recognizing either you are with us or against us, to quote the leader of the free world. So friends, what would the Rebbe say? Be strong. Don't despair. Be proud. If there's anti-Semitism, God forbid, recognize it's because you are a leader, it's because you are a teacher, and it's not seldom that the troublemaker in the classroom resents the teacher. Every one of us, as said earlier, can make a difference in so many ways. Going to Israel, not to cancel trips, to send our money, to send our support. But we can also help Israel in a very simple fashion, as was alluded to earlier. When we do a mitzvah, in 1967, when the state of Israel was looked upon in mortal danger, the Lubavitcher Rebbe said, in quoting from the Torah, "V'ra'u kol amei ha'aretz ki shem Hashem nikra alecha v'yaru mimeka." The enemies of the Jews will see that the name of God is written upon you, and they will fear you. The Talmud explains this to mean the mitzvah of tefillin. The Rebbe then called upon soldiers in the Israel Defense Force and Jews around the world to do the mitzvah of tefillin, and for Jewish women to light the candles for Shabbat. Thousands of soldiers in the IDF at that time lined up with their sleeves rolled up to heed the Rebbe's call. The world then witnessed the obviously miraculous salvation. Once again in 1990, when Scuds were flying over Israel, the Rebbe made an unequivocal statement that Israel will be protected by Almighty God, and was the lone voice of comfort. No doubt today, as Israel is in true despair, Eis Tzarahi Liyakiv, Torah says. It's a time of trouble and tribulation for Israel. Umimeno Yivasheya, there will be a salvation. We will unite as then. Let's roll up our sleeves to put on tefillin. You want to help Israel? Put on tefillin. Light a candle on Friday night for Shabbat. Take a few coins, put it in a charity box. Say a few words of prayer. Greet a fellow Jew and a fellow human being with a smile and with warmth. Every good deed matters. Every good deed is real. And every one of us feels that connection to our Jewishness inherently. The Talmud says, Lev Yisrael Ar, the Jewish heart is awake. No matter what your background and affiliation and level of observance, In a very real way, every one of us identifies with our heritage, with our Torah, with our mitzvot. We are one united people, as it says on your t-shirts. Am Yisrael Chai, Am Yisrael Am Echad. I don't care if you have a black hat, whether you wear a black hat or a yarmulke or a kippah sruga or no hat, we are one people and our mitzvahs matter. Let's remember we have no other labels, not Orthodox, Reform, Hasidic, Lubavitch. We have one label, and it's a 3-letter word called Jew. Let's go home after the rally and take upon a tangible mitzvah, to put on tefillin, to give tzedakah, to light a candle, to help a fellow Jew. I met in the days after 9/11 with a high-level politician from this area, and the man who's usually happy-go-lucky on top of the world was totally distressed and destroyed. And he looked at me with eyes of tears and of utter giving up, no hope. And he said, "Rabbi, is this the beginning of the end?" So I needed to share something with him. I said, "Let me tell you a story from the Talmud of Rabbi Akiva." He was walking after the destruction of the temple with his colleagues, and they saw the Temple Mount in ruins. The city was pillaged and robbed, and blood was flowing like rivers. And his friends, the rabbis, were crying. Rabbi Akiva was smiling. And they said, "Akiva, why are you smiling? And why are you crying? Why are we crying? Take a look around you. Take a look what's going on. Faxen, we're walking out of the holiest of holy. We're witnessing the unthinkable." Says Rabbi Akiva, "That's why I'm smiling. The prophets promised of a time of unthinkable good, of world peace, of harmony, of love, with no illness and no pain and no war, with this plenty for everyone. It was too good. It was unimaginable. It was unthinkable. Now that I've witnessed the unthinkable evil, why can't I expect the unthinkable good?" Friends, in the last year and a half, we witnessed the unthinkable evil. We saw the worst terror attack on these shores in its history. We see parents joyfully sending their children off for suicide missions, men, women, and children. Unthinkable evil, unadulterated evil, evil that the Nazis were not capable of. Friends, prepare, let us prepare to witness the unthinkable good. As the Rebbe told us in no uncertain terms, that we in our generation will merit to see redemption, to see the world unite. No, I said to that diplomat, it's not the beginning of the end. As the Rebbe said in 1990, it's the beginning of the end of evil. As the world is uniting against evil, the powers of evil are rearing their ugly head for the final time. Every decent human being today recognizes evil for what it is. Friends, we've witnessed the unthinkable. Let's prepare speedily to witness unthinkable good through our added mitzvot with the redemption through Mashiach now.